Let's dive into a wild story about how one tiny clerical error at a bank completely spiraled out of control. It turned into a massive legal battle that, believe it or not, ended up changing the rules for the entire banking industry. This is all about a bank's huge blunder and the fortune it ended up costing them.
Think about it. We all do it, right? You put your hard-earned money in a bank and you just trust them. You trust that the numbers are right, that your money's safe. But what happens when that trust gets broken? What happens when the one place you count on to get it right gets it spectacularly wrong?
Okay, so let's set the scene. Our story really revolves around two main players. First, you've got Simex International, a company that exports food. And on the other side, you've got their bank, Traders Royal Bank. You know, this was just a totally normal, everyday business relationship. Until, well, it really wasn't.
Now, to really get what's at stake here, you have to understand how a business like Simex works. Their whole operation was built on two really crucial things: being able to buy supplies on credit and, maybe even more importantly, having a perfect reputation with those suppliers. Cash flow and trust were everything.
And here is where it all goes completely off the rails. On May 25th, Simex makes a big deposit, 100,000 pesos. Thinking that money is safely in their account, they start writing checks to pay their suppliers. But here's the kicker. The bank never actually credited the deposit. The money just vanished from their balance. By the time Simex finds out on June 10th, because their checks are bouncing left and right, the damage is already spreading. And look at that last date. It took the bank a full 23 days to fix its own mistake. 23 days. See, this wasn't just some little accounting hiccup. That one error, that one failure to credit a deposit, set off a truly disastrous chain reaction. It turned a simple mistake into an absolute business nightmare.
We're talking about dishonored checks going out to major suppliers, to shipping companies, even to the Bureau of Internal Revenue. I mean, can you even imagine your check to the government bouncing? The damage to your reputation is instant, and it is catastrophic.
And the real-world fallout was immediate and severe. Simex started getting these angry demand letters. One of their biggest suppliers completely canceled their credit line and demanded cash up front for everything. Other suppliers just stopped processing their orders altogether. Their business was basically grinding to a halt, all because their bank messed up.
So, of course, Simex sued. I mean, wouldn't you? The bank admitted they made a mistake, and they did eventually pay the checks. But Simex argued, hey, the damage to our business, to our good name, is already done. So the legal fight wasn't about if the bank was wrong. That was obvious. The real question was, what is a ruined reputation actually worth in dollars and cents? Or, well, pesos.
Just look at the massive disconnect here. Simex felt their reputation, their good name, had been absolutely destroyed. They were asking for 1.5 million pesos in damages. But the lower courts, they came back with this tiny, tiny fraction of that. Just 20,000 pesos in something called nominal damages.
So what in the world are nominal damages? Well, it's basically the court's way of saying, yep, a rule was broken and your rights were violated, but without actually giving you money for the real harm you suffered. For Simex, it was like winning the battle but losing the war, a symbolic victory that felt like a total defeat.
The reasoning from the lower courts was basically this. The bank messed up, sure, but it wasn't on purpose. It wasn't malicious. And hey, they did fix it, eventually. For them, that was kind of good enough. But Simex knew the damage was real, and they weren't giving up. They took their case all the way to the top.
And that brings us to the final showdown, at the Supreme Court. Now, the court here wasn't just looking at the nitty-gritty details of this one case. They were about to make a huge statement about the fundamental duty a bank has to its customers.
Wow, the Supreme Court did not pull any punches. I mean, that quote says it all, doesn't it? They basically said the lower courts completely downplayed how serious this was, and a slap on the wrist was definitely not going to cut it.
For the Supreme Court, the real problem wasn't just the initial mistake. Anyone can make a typo. Now, the big issue was the bank's lackadaisical attitude afterward. Taking 23 days to fix a critical error like this, that wasn't just simple carelessness. The court called it what it was: gross negligence.
And that finding that this was gross negligence changed everything. It opened the door for moral damages. This is compensation for exactly what Simex went through: a blackened reputation, social humiliation, and the key part is, you don't have to prove an exact peso amount of the loss to get them.
So the Supreme Court awarded 20,000 pesos in moral damages. Now, you might be thinking, wait, that's the same amount as before. But
the type of damage is completely different. This wasn't just a symbolic gesture. This was actual compensation for the real harm done to Simex's good name, and the court wasn't done yet.
Next up were exemplary damages. Now, these are different. This isn't about paying back the victim. This is about punishing the wrongdoer and sending a powerful message to everyone else in the industry to make sure this kind of thing never, ever happens again.
And the court slammed them with 50,000 pesos in exemplary damages. This was a direct warning shot, not just to Traders Royal Bank, but to the entire banking industry. It was a clear message against this kind of ineptness and indifference. It was meant to be a lesson.
So this one case, which started with a single misplaced deposit, became this huge landmark ruling. The Supreme Court basically used this moment to lay down the law on the very nature of banking itself.
And this right here, this is the heart of it all. Banks have to treat your money with meticulous care. It's what's called a fiduciary relationship, which means it's built on the absolute highest standard of trust. It's not just another business deal, it's a sacred trust.
So, what's the big lesson here? First, banking isn't just any old business. It's tied to the public interest. Second, banks owe us, their customers, the utmost fidelity. And as this case proved beyond a shadow of a doubt, just fixing your mistake later doesn't wipe the slate clean. You're still on the hook for the damage you caused.
And that really leaves us all with a pretty important question to think about, doesn't it? The law demands that your bank treat your money with meticulous care. After hearing what happened to Simex, it's definitely worth asking yourself, does my bank actually live up to that standard?